The wind howls through arrow slits like a banshee tonight, and the stone beneath your feet steals warmth from your very bones. You've stepped into a world where even crowns couldn't command comfort, where survival meant more than ruling kingdoms. Before we journey deeper into this frozen realm, take a moment to like this video if you're ready to experience history through your senses, and subscribe for more immersive tales from the past. Now, pull your cloak tighter and follow me into the heart of winter's most unforgiving fortress. The great oak door groans shut behind you, sealing out the howling storm but trapping you within walls that seem to breathe with cold. Your breath forms ghostly clouds in the air as you stand in the entrance hall of this medieval stronghold. The stones around you aren't just walls. They're thermal vampires, sucking every whisper of warmth from the air and hoarding it in their frozen depths. These aren't the castles of fairy tales. This is survival wrapped in silk and chainmail. Listen closely. Do you hear that? The constant, subtle whisper of wind finding every crack, every seam in the mortar. Medieval castles were fortresses against men, not against winter. The very strength that made these walls impenetrable to armies made them perfect conductors of cold. Each stone block acts like a massive ice cube, maintaining the temperature of the harshest nights even when fires rage within. You make your way toward the great hall, your footsteps echoing off walls that have witnessed centuries of shivering nobility. The rushes scattered across the floor crackle beneath your feet, releasing the scent of dried herbs mixed with something earthier, something that speaks of survival rather than luxury. These aren't just floor coverings. They're primitive insulation, trapping whatever meager heat rises from below while masking the odors of a world without modern sanitation. The great hall stretches before you like a cathedral of stone and shadow. In the center, a massive hearth roars with desperate fury, its flames licking upward toward a ceiling lost in darkness. But here's what strikes you immediately. The warmth doesn't travel. Stand within arm's reach of that fire and you feel its blessing. Take 3 steps back and the cold reclaims you with the ruthlessness of a predator. Servants scurry past, their arms laden with logs thick as your torso. The consumption of fuel in a medieval castle during winter was staggering. Entire forests disappeared into these hungry mouths of stone and flame. Yet for all their feeding, the fires remained prisoners of the hearth, their warmth held hostage by the very architecture meant to protect. You notice the tapestries hanging along the walls, massive woven scenes depicting hunts and saints and mythical beasts. But look closer. These aren't just decorations, they're survival tools. Each hanging creates a pocket of air between the brutal stone and the living space. A textile shield against the relentless cold. The wealthy didn't collect tapestries for beauty alone. They collected them to live through winter. A figure approaches through the flickering shadows. A royal attendant wrapped in layers of wool and fur. Their face is pale, not from fear, but from the constant battle against cold that turns even summer skin translucent by February. They gesture toward a narrow stone staircase that spirals upward into darkness. The royal chambers await, they whisper, but their voice carries a warning that comfort is relative in this fortress of ice. The stairs are treacherous, not from age, but from the moisture that seeps through stone and freezes in the joints. Each step upward takes you further from the great hall's fire, deeper into the castle's frozen heart. The walls press closer here, and you realize this isn't just architecture, it's thermal psychology. The smaller the space, the easier it becomes to heat, but also the more claustrophobic the fight for warmth becomes. You emerge into a corridor lined with doors, each leading to chambers where nobility once tried to sleep winters that lasted half the year. The door to the royal bedchamber stands slightly ajar, and through it seeps not warmth, but the golden glow of candlelight mixed with something else, the faint scent of burning herbs and the musk of fur. Step inside, and your breath catches, not from cold this time, but from the sheer audacity of the attempt at comfort. The chamber stretches before you, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into shadows that dance with each flicker of flame. But it's the bed that commands your attention, a massive four-poster construction that looks less like furniture and more like a fortress within a fortress. The bed stands elevated on a platform, its posts carved with the symbols of power, lions and crowns, and religious motifs that speak to divine authority. But divine authority, you quickly realize, means nothing to Winter. The posts rise toward the ceiling like the masts of a ship, supporting a canopy of heavy fabric that hangs like sails in still air. These curtains aren't decorative. They're survival equipment, designed to trap the body heat of sleepers and create a microclimate within the larger hostile environment of the stone chamber. Approach the bed and run your hand along one of the curtains. The fabric is thick, woven from wool so dense it feels almost waterproof. It hangs heavy and still, creating a barrier between the sleeper and the vast, cold chamber beyond. When drawn closed, these curtains transform the bed into a cave of cloth, a textile womb where royalty could retreat from the relentless siege of winter. But the bed itself tells an even more complex story of survival. The mattress isn't a single entity, but a carefully constructed system of layers. At the base, ropes stretch tight between the frame, a suspension system that provided support, while allowing air circulation to prevent the accumulation of moisture that could freeze in the depths of night. Upon these ropes, multiple mattresses stacked like geological layers, each serving a specific purpose in the war against cold. The bottom layer might be stuffed with straw, providing basic support and insulation from the rope framework below. Above that, wool-stuffed mattresses added thickness and warmth retention. At the top, if wealth allowed, a feather mattress provided the luxury of softness while creating thousands of tiny air pockets that trapped warm air like a textile greenhouse. Feel the weight of the bedding as you lift a corner of the coverlet. It's not just heavy, it's oppressive. Layers upon layers of wool blankets, fur throws, and quilted coverlets that could easily weigh more than the person sleeping beneath them. This isn't comfort as we know it today. This is survival disguised as luxury. Each layer serves a purpose in creating a thermal sandwich that might, with luck and careful tending, keep a human body from freezing through the darkest hours of winter. The furs tell their own tale of medieval priorities. Squirrel fur, prized for its density and softness, sewn into coverlets that shimmer in the candlelight. Wolf pelts, their original owners chosen not for their symbolic power, but for the thickness of their winter coats. Bear fur, rare and precious, reserved for the coldest nights when even multiple layers of domestic wool couldn't hold back the castle's icy breath. But look around the chamber and notice what's missing. There are no wardrobes full of light nightgowns, no delicate sleepwear folded in lavender-scented drawers. The clothing scattered on chairs and chests speaks of a different approach to sleep. Heavy woolen gowns, thick stockings, caps lined with fur, these are the pajamas of survival. Medieval royalty didn't undress for bed, they layered for it, adding clothes rather than removing them, preparing for sleep like soldiers preparing for battle. Near the bed, you spot a curious contraption, a long-handled pan with a perforated lid. This is a warming pan, a medieval heating system that required servants to risk burns and fire to provide a few minutes of comfort. Hot coals from the great hall's fire would be placed inside, and a brave attendant would slide it between the sheets, moving it constantly to avoid scorching the expensive linens while heating the bed's interior. The process was dangerous, labor-intensive, and provided only temporary relief. But for royalty facing a night in a stone refrigerator, it was worth the risk. The fireplace in this chamber struggles valiantly against the overwhelming cold. Built into the wall with an ornate stone mantel that speaks of wealth and power, it consumes log after log in a futile attempt to heat the vast space. The flames dance and roar, but step away from its immediate vicinity, and you feel the cold pressing in like water, filling a sinking ship. The heat rises uselessly toward the high ceiling, leaving the floor level where humans sleep as cold as the stone beneath. You notice servants entering quietly, their arms full of fresh logs and their faces bearing the resigned expression of those who fight a losing battle every night. They feed the fire with the dedication of soldiers manning a siege, knowing that their vigilance is all that stands between their royal charges and the kind of cold that kills. Through the night, they'll return every few hours, stoking the flames, replacing burned logs, fighting to maintain even the illusion of warmth in this stone cathedral of cold. The windows, narrow slits designed more for defense than illumination, are shuttered tight against the storm outside. Yet even through the heavy wooden barriers, you can feel the cold seeping in, finding every gap, every imperfection in the seal. Ice crystals form on the interior wood, and drafts that seem to have malicious intent probe for exposed skin. These aren't windows in any modern sense. They're carefully controlled vulnerabilities in the castle's armor, necessary for light and air, but impossible to fully seal against winter's invasion. As you stand in this chamber, surrounded by the trappings of medieval power and wealth, the truth becomes inescapably clear. Kings and queens, for all their authority over lands and lives, were as vulnerable to winter as any peasant in a hovel. Their wealth bought them layers, not immunity. Their power commanded servants to tend fires, not the ability to banish cold. Their royal blood ran just as likely to freeze as any commoner's. When the stones held winter in their hearts, and the wind found every crack in their carefully constructed defenses. The night ahead promises to be long, cold, and restless, a testament to the humbling power of winter over even the mightiest rulers in their strongest fortresses. The chamber settles into an uneasy quiet as servants retreat to their own cold corners of the castle. You're left alone with the monarch's nightly ritual, a ceremony as elaborate as any coronation, yet infinitely more intimate. Watch as attendants help the royal figure shed the heavy robes of day, each garment peeled away like armor after battle. But this isn't undressing as you know it. This is preparation for a different kind of warfare. The linen undergarments that emerge are thick, woven tight against the penetrating cold. Over these, a nightgown of wool, its fabric scratchy against skin but essential for survival. The attendants move with practiced efficiency, wrapping the monarch in layers that transform the human form into something resembling a walking bedroll. Thick stockings, woolen caps that cover ears and neck, even mittens designed specifically for sleep. Every inch of skin that might surrender heat to the stone chamber is covered, armored against the night's assault. You watch this transformation with fascination. Here stands a person who commands armies, who signs treaties that reshape kingdoms, yet they must submit to being dressed like a child against the cold. Power, in this moment, reveals itself as nothing more than the ability to afford better wool, thicker furs, more layers between flesh and the unforgiving stone that surrounds them. The ritual moves to the bed itself. Servants lift the heavy curtains, creating an opening in the textile fortress. Steam rises faintly from within, evidence of the warming pans that have done their work. The monarch approaches this cocoon of fabric and fur with the solemnity of someone entering a sacred space. And perhaps it is sacred, this nightly retreat from a world that offers no quarter to human frailty. You follow their gaze upward to the canopy above. The fabric stretches taut, creating a ceiling within the ceiling, a sky of wool and silk that will trap the rising warmth of bodies and breath. Every thread of this textile architecture serves a purpose. The weave is tight enough to block drafts, yet loose enough to prevent suffocation. The colors, rich reds and deep blues, aren't chosen for beauty alone, but for their psychological warmth, visual fire to supplement the meager heat that struggles against the stone. As the monarch settles into the layers of bedding, you witness something remarkable. The bed doesn't just receive them, it swallows them. The mattresses compress and conform, creating a depression that becomes a nest of warmth. The multiple layers of coverlets and furs are arranged with scientific precision, each serving its role in the thermal equation. Wool against the body for insulation, fur on top for weight and wind resistance, silk in between for smoothness and additional barrier protection. The curtains close with a whisper of heavy fabric, and suddenly the vast chamber is divided. Outside the textile walls, cold stone and flickering shadows. Inside, a microclimate begins to form, warmed by body heat and protected from the drafts that prowl the chamber like hungry wolves. This is medieval technology at its most ingenious, a portable climate created from nothing more than thread and animal pelts. But you're not alone in witnessing this nightly retreat. Peer into the shadows and you'll spot them, the attendants who remain. Some sleep on pallets near the fire, ready to rise and feed the flames when the cold grows too bold. Others huddle in alcoves, wrapped in their own meager coverings, their proximity to royalty earning them slightly warmer sleeping spots than the servants in the lower halls. Even in sleep, the castle maintains its hierarchy, with comfort distributed according to rank and necessity. Listen carefully, and you'll hear the sounds that accompany royal slumber. The fire pops and hisses, consuming wood with the steady appetite of survival. Somewhere in the walls, the wind finds a gap and whistles a thin, mournful note. From the chambers below, the occasional cough or murmur of other sleepers drifts upward, reminders that the castle never truly sleeps, never fully surrenders to the night. The breathing within the curtained bed gradually deepens, but even in sleep, the battle against cold continues. The body generates heat, but the stone walls absorb it relentlessly. The furs and fabrics trap what they can, but thermal physics recognizes no crown, acknowledges no royal authority. Heat flows from warm to cold with the inevitability of water finding its level, and the stones of this castle have been cold far longer than any human has been warm. You notice something else as the night deepens. The chamber itself begins to change. Moisture from breathing condenses on the cold stone walls, creating a thin film of frost that glitters in the firelight. The air grows thicker, heavy with the scent of burning wood, woolen fabric, and the musk of fur. This is the atmosphere of survival, dense with the efforts of humans to maintain life in a structure designed primarily for defense. The fire settles into a rhythm, its flames smaller now but still determined. The logs crack and split as they burn, each sound sharp in the cold air. A servant rises from their pallet, adds another piece of wood, tends the coals with practiced movements before returning to their own inadequate bedding. This dance will repeat throughout the night, a careful choreography of fuel management and fire maintenance that keeps death at bay one log at a time. Through the narrow windows, though shuttered tight, you can sense the storm continuing its assault on the castle walls. Snow builds against the barriers, and wind seeks every weakness in the structure's defenses. Inside, the battle lines are drawn differently. Humans and their fires occupy small islands of relative warmth, while the greater kingdom belongs to cold and stone. The royal bed becomes a ship in this sea of winter, its textile sails billowing slightly with each breath from within. The sleeper shifts occasionally, adjusting to the weight of layers, the press of fur, the constant need to maintain the careful balance between warmth and suffocation. Even in dreams, the body knows it fights for survival. As midnight approaches, the true test begins. This is when fires burn lowest, when the stones have had hours to absorb and radiate away whatever heat the day provided. The chamber grows colder still, and you feel it in your bones. That deep chill that no amount of wool can fully banish. The royal sleeper, cocooned in their fortress of fabric, dreams perhaps of summer halls and sun-warmed stones, but their body remains anchored to this winter reality. You realize now that royal sleep in medieval times wasn't rest as we understand it. It was endurance, a nightly test of will against the fundamental hostility of the environment. The crown might command respect from subjects, but it earned no deference from winter. The scepter might rule kingdoms, but it couldn't rule the physics of heat and cold. In the darkness of this chamber, surrounded by the finest textiles and furs that wealth could purchase, royalty faced the same mortal challenge as any peasant huddled by a cottage fire. The night stretches on, measured not in hours, but in the rhythm of breathing within curtained beds, in the crackle of logs feeding hungry flames, in the whisper of wind through stone corridors. This is how power slept when winter ruled the world, not in comfort, but in careful preparation, not in luxury, but in layers, not in peace, but in the constant quiet struggle against the cold that acknowledges no authority save its own relentless advance. The hours crawl by with the patience of glaciers, and within the curtained sanctuary, sleep refuses to come easily. You shift beneath the weight of coverings, feeling how each movement sends ripples through the carefully constructed thermal environment. The furs slide against wool, silk whispers against linen, and somewhere in this symphony of textures, comfort battles constantly with the prison of layers necessary for survival. Your breath fogs the air inside the enclosure, a reminder that even within this textile fortress, the cold presses close. The moisture of your exhalation condenses on the inner walls of fabric, creating tiny droplets that catch the faint glow of firelight seeping through the weave. This is your atmosphere now, thick with the scent of wool and the earthy musk of animal pelts, heavy with the weight of survival rather than the lightness of luxury. Listen to the sounds that surround your cocoon. Beyond the curtains, the fire has settled into its nighttime rhythm, burning lower but more steadily, each log carefully selected by servants who understand that waste means death when dawn is still hours away. The flames cast dancing shadows at play across the stone walls, creating an ever-shifting gallery of light and darkness that would mesmerize if you could see it through the heavy fabric barriers. From somewhere deep in the castle's bowels comes the sound of footsteps, measured and deliberate. Night guards making their rounds, their boots echoing off stone corridors as they patrol against threats both human and natural. Their presence is a comfort, knowing that others remain awake in this frozen fortress, but also a reminder that sleep is a luxury even kings must steal from the watchful night. You adjust your position carefully, mindful not to disturb the delicate arrangement of bedding that maintains your pocket of warmth. Each layer has found its place through hours of settling, wool compressing against wool, furs molding to the contours of your body, creating a custom-fitted armor against the cold. To disrupt this architecture would mean starting over, reconstructing the thermal barriers that stand between you and the stone's relentless hunger for heat. The cap on your head feels strange yet necessary, its wool fibers scratching against your scalp, but trapping the heat that would otherwise rise and disappear into the chamber's vast coldness. Your hands, mittened even in sleep, remain tucked close to your body, fingers curled into fists that preserve their warmth. This is sleep as medieval royalty knew it. Not relaxation, but careful preservation of life force through the darkest hours. A servant stirs somewhere near the hearth, rising to tend the fire with movement so practiced They require no thought. The scrape of iron tools against stone, the whisper of fresh wood being placed among the coals, the brief flare of renewed flame. These sounds punctuate the night like a slow heartbeat, marking time in a world where clocks are luxuries and survival is measured in degrees of warmth retained. The wind outside finds new voices as the storm continues its assault on the castle walls. Sometimes it moans through the arrow slits like a mourning spirit. Sometimes it shrieks across the battlements with the fury of something denied entry. But within your textile cave, these sounds become distant, muffled by layers of fabric into something almost musical. A lullaby of winter's rage held at bay by human ingenuity and animal sacrifice. Your body begins to find its rhythm despite the challenges. The weight of the coverings, initially oppressive, becomes familiar, like being held by something vast and protective. The scratch of wool against skin fades into background sensation as your nerve endings adapt to their fibrous prison. Even the awkwardness of sleeping fully clothed begins to feel natural as your muscles learn to relax within their woolen constraints. Dreams, when they come, are strange in this environment. The dense air and heavy coverings create a sense of floating, of being suspended between consciousness and the void. Images drift through your mind like smoke from the fire, visions of summer gardens and sun-warmed stone, memories of warmth that feel like fantasies in this ice-bound reality. Your sleeping mind conjures halls filled with light and laughter, but your body remains anchored to the truth of wool and fur and the constant whisper of wind through stone. The fire settles lower still, its glow dimming to a steady orange pulse that barely penetrates the curtained enclosure. This is the dangerous time, when the flames consume their fuel faster than servants can safely replenish it, when the cold begins its most serious advance into the chamber's defended spaces. You feel it as a subtle shift in the air, a gradual cooling that seeps through even the most carefully constructed barriers. Somewhere in the castle's depths, a bell tolls the canonical hours, its bronze voice carrying through stone corridors to mark another segment of the endless night. The sound reaches you muffled and distant, filtered through layers of architecture and fabric until it becomes less noise than vibration, a tremor in the bones that speaks of time's passage in a world where dawn seems impossibly far away. Your breathing synchronizes with the rhythm of the night, shallow and careful, to conserve the warmth of your exhaled air within the enclosed space. Each breath creates a small cloud of vapor that dissipates slowly in the thick atmosphere of the bed enclosure, adding its moisture to the complex ecosystem of survival you've created within these textile walls. The servants who sleep nearby shift occasionally on their pallets, their own dreams troubled by cold and duty. They've chosen proximity to royal privilege over whatever meager comfort might be found in the servants' quarters, trading the democracy of shared misery for the slightly better odds of survival near the chamber's best fire. Their breathing adds to the symphony of the night, human rhythms played against the percussion of wind and flame. As the night deepens toward its coldest hour, you understand something fundamental about medieval power. The crown might command armies, but it cannot command warmth. The scepter might rule subjects, but it holds no authority over the physics of stone and air and human flesh. In this moment, wrapped in layers of the finest materials wealth can purchase, you are no different from any peasant huddled in their cottage, another fragile flame of life flickering in winter's vast darkness. The cold presses closer as the fire burns lower, finding new ways to infiltrate your defenses. It seeps through the spaces between fabric layers, creeps along the ropes that support your mattress, rises from the stone floor like an invisible flood that no amount of elevation can fully escape. Your body generates heat with the determination of survival, but the castle absorbs it with the patience of geological time. Stone walls that have been cold since before your grandfather's grandfather drew breath. You pull the furs closer, feeling their weight settle around you like the embrace of winter itself. Each pelt tells its own story of survival. Animals that once faced these same brutal seasons in forests and fields beyond the castle walls. Now their thick coats serve a different purpose. Their sacrifice measured not in the hunt, but in degrees of warmth, preserved through the killing hours before dawn. The chamber around you settles into its deepest quiet, that profound hush that comes when night reaches its zenith, and even the wind pauses to gather strength for the final assault on morning. This is when the cold grows boldest, when stone walls radiate their accumulated chill with the efficiency of ice, when even the bravest fires begin to falter under the weight of their long battle against the dark. In this silence, you hear your own heartbeat, steady and determined, pumping warmth through vessels that carry life to extremities already growing numb despite the layers that surround them. Your pulse becomes the rhythm of survival, each beat a small victory against the forces that would still it forever. This is how royalty learned to sleep in the age of stone and ice, not in comfort, but in the careful maintenance of the spark that separates the living from the cold. The night stretches on, unmeasured and seemingly endless, while you float in your cocoon of necessity, breathing the thick air of survival and dreaming dreams colored by firelight and the promise of dawn that feels like a fairy tale in this kingdom ruled by winter's iron crown. Somewhere in the deepest part of the night, when even the wind holds its breath, you feel a presence stirring beyond the curtained walls. Not a threat, but something more subtle and persistent. The awakening of your own body's demands that no amount of royal privilege can silence. The call of nature arrives with the same democratic insistence for kings as it does for scullery maids. And in this frozen fortress, answering it becomes an ordeal that tests the limits of noble endurance. You shift beneath the layers, feeling the careful architecture of warmth begin to collapse as movement disturbs the thermal equilibrium you've spent hours creating. The decision looms before you, like a tactical choice in battle. Do you brave the journey from your textile sanctuary to the chamber pot hidden behind its wooden screen? Or do you attempt to endure until dawn brings servants and the relative warmth of daylight activity? The chamber pot waits in the shadows, a crude ceramic vessel that represents both necessity and luxury. for peasants in their hovels might venture outside into the killing cold. But royalty has earned the right to relieve themselves within stone walls, even if those walls offer little protection from the temperature that turns breath to fog and makes every surface a potential weapon of frost. You begin the careful process of emergence, each movement calculated to preserve as much warmth as possible while extracting yourself from the cocoon that has become your lifeline. The furs resist, clinging to your woolen-wrapped form as if they too understand the foolishness of abandoning their thermal partnership. Layer by layer, you peel back the defenses, feeling the chamber's cold air probe for entry points in your clothing like enemy scouts testing fortifications. The moment your feet touch the stone floor, even through thick stockings, the cold strikes with the precision of a blade. The stone has been drinking cold from the earth and air for hours, storing it in its crystalline depths, and now it offers this gift to your unprotected souls with the generosity of winter itself. You understand immediately why servants placed rushes and carpets anywhere human feet might tread, not for comfort, but for the basic preservation of flesh that would otherwise freeze to stone. The journey across the chamber becomes an Arctic expedition, measured in heartbeats rather than steps. Each footfall sends shocks of cold up through your legs, reminders that the stone beneath recognizes no rank, no privilege, only the simple physics of heat transfer from warm flesh to cold mineral. Your breath clouds before you in thick plumes, and you realize that you're exhaling not just moisture, but precious warmth that the chamber immediately claims for its own. Behind the wooden screen, the chamber pot sits like a throne of necessity, its ceramic surface so cold that touching it sends shivers through your entire frame. This is medieval plumbing at its most sophisticated, a portable solution to biological needs that nonetheless requires the courage of an Arctic explorer to utilize. The servants who empty these vessels each morning earn their bread through acts of service that modern minds can barely comprehend, handling frozen waste in chambers that preserve it, like ice preserves meat. The return journey to bed becomes a race against hypothermia, your body already surrendering its carefully hoarded heat to the vampire stones that surround you. The chamber pot accomplished its purpose, but at a cost measured in degrees of warmth that will take precious time to regenerate beneath the furs. You understand now why chamber pots were often kept as close to the bed as privacy allowed, why the wealthy invested in screens and covers that could minimize the exposure required for this basic human function. Reaching the bed feels like achieving sanctuary after crossing enemy territory. You dive beneath the curtains with the desperation of a drowning person reaching for air, pulling the heavy fabrics closed behind you with trembling fingers. But the damage is done. The careful thermal environment you spent hours creating has been shattered by your brief expedition, and now you must begin the slow process of reconstruction while your body shivers uncontrollably in its woolen prison. The layers that once felt warm now feel merely cold rather than freezing, a relative improvement that nonetheless leaves you chattering and curled into the tightest possible ball. Your feet The primary casualties of the stone floor encounter feel like blocks of ice attached to your ankles, and you tuck them up against your body, hoping to share what little warmth your core maintains. The furs pile on top of you, but their insulation works both ways, trapping the cold you've brought back as efficiently as they once trapped heat. This is when you truly understand the medieval relationship with bodily functions. What modern life treats as minor inconvenience becomes major expedition in a world where warmth is precious and cold is deadly. The chamber pot isn't just convenience, it's a calculated risk, a trade of comfort for survival that even royalty must carefully consider before undertaking. Gradually, painfully, your body begins to regenerate the heat lost during your Arctic adventure. The process feels like awakening from death, sensation returning to extremities that had begun to surrender to the cold. Your breathing, which had become sharp and panicked during the crossing, settles back into the careful rhythm of conservation. The layers around you slowly resume their work of insulation, trapping your renewed body heat and building once again the fragile ecosystem of survival. But the experience has changed something fundamental about your relationship with the night. You now understand viscerally why medieval people spoke of winter as a living enemy, why they treated cold as a presence rather than merely an absence of heat. The chamber pot expedition has revealed the true precariousness of your situation, how quickly the careful balance between survival and death can shift with a few moments of exposed flesh against hostile stone. The servants sleeping near the hearth stir occasionally, and you wonder how many times they've made similar journeys, how many nights they've risked their carefully guarded warmth for the demands of biology. Their pallets near the fire represent not luxury, but strategic positioning, the difference between surviving the night and becoming another casualty of winter's relentless advance. As your body temperature stabilizes and the shivering subsides, you realize that this interruption has taught you something profound about medieval life. Every comfort, every convenience came with a price measured in risk and endurance. The simple act of relieving yourself became a tactical decision, a calculation of necessity versus preservation that had to be made multiple times throughout the endless winter nights. The chamber pot waits behind its screen, patient and cold, ready for the next brave soul willing to trade warmth for necessity. It represents the democracy of biological needs in a world stratified by rank and privilege, the great equalizer that reminds even kings that they are, in the end, merely human flesh, vulnerable to the same cold that threatens every living thing in this fortress of stone. You settle deeper into your restored nest of furs and fabric, grateful for the return of relative warmth, but forever changed by your brief encounter with the chamber's true hostility. The night continues its slow advance toward dawn, but now you carry the knowledge of what it costs to be human in a world where winter rules with absolute authority and even the most basic needs become acts of courage measured against the constant threat of cold. The memory of cold stone against your feet lingers like a warning, a reminder that the safety of your textile sanctuary is always temporary, always subject to the demands of the flesh that no amount of royal blood can transcend. In this understanding, you find a strange kinship with every medieval soul who faced the same choice, the same risk, the same careful balance between survival and the simple, inescapable needs that make us all equal in the democracy of Winter's kingdom. Time moves differently in this suspended state between sleep and waking, between warmth and cold, between survival and surrender. The night has become a landscape you must navigate rather than simply endure, each hour bringing new challenges and small victories in the ongoing war between human fragility and stone indifference. Now the chamber settles back into its rhythm of survival, the fire continuing its patient consumption of wood, the servants maintaining their vigilant half-sleep near the hearth, and you wrapped once again in layers that represent not comfort, but the careful engineering of survival in a world that offers no quarter to the unprepared. The cold has tested you and found you wanting, but also resilient. You have made the journey and returned, paid the price, and lived to warm yourself again. In this small victory, you understand something essential about medieval existence, that life was not lived but won, not enjoyed but endured, not comfortable but carefully, constantly, courageously maintained against forces that recognized no crown, no privilege, no authority, save their own relentless advance through the long, dark nights of winter's endless reign. The hours that follow your Arctic expedition pass with new awareness, each moment of returning warmth a small miracle, each breath of heated air within your textile cave a victory against the vast coldness that surrounds this tiny island of human persistence. You have learned the true cost of medieval survival, measured not in gold or land, but in the simple, precious currency of body heat, preserved against all odds through the killing hours before dawn. The night deepens further, approaching that mysterious hour when darkness reaches its absolute zenith and begins its slow retreat toward morning. This is when the cold grows most bold, most confident in its dominion over stone and flesh alike. Yet here you lie, wrapped in the accumulated sacrifices of countless animals and the labor of countless hands, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of nature's most relentless assault. Your breathing has found its deepest rhythm now, each exhalation carefully conserved within the enclosed space of your survival shelter. The air grows thick with the scent of wool and fur, heavy with moisture from your lungs, dense with the atmosphere of endurance. This is not the fresh, clean air of modern bedrooms, but something altogether more primal, the atmosphere of creatures huddled against extinction, breathing the recycled breath of survival. Somewhere in the castle's depths, a bell tolls another canonical hour, its bronze voice carrying through corridors of stone to mark time's passage in a world where dawn feels like a rumor whispered by the hopeful. The sound reaches you muffled by layers of fabric and distance, more vibration than noise, a tremor in the bones that speaks of pilgrims and prayers, of others who wake in the darkness to tend spiritual fires while you tend to the physical flame of staying alive. The servants near the hearth shift in their sleep, their dreams perhaps touched by the same cold that stalks your own rest. They have chosen proximity to royal privilege over the democratic misery of servants' quarters, trading the equality of shared suffering for the slightly better odds of survival near the chamber's primary heat source. Their breathing adds to the night's symphony. Human rhythms played against the percussion of wind and flame and the subtle settling of ancient stones adjusting to winter's weight. Your body has begun to adapt to its textile prison, muscles learning to relax within the constraints of multiple layers, skin accepting the constant scratch of wool as the price of warmth. The weight of coverings that once felt oppressive now seems protective, like being held by something vast and patient that understands the necessity of this embrace. You float in layers of survival technology, each thread and fiber a deliberate choice in the architecture of endurance. Dreams, when they venture into this dense atmosphere, arrive strange and heavy, colored by the thick air and the constant awareness of cold pressing just beyond the fabric barriers. Your sleeping mind conjures images of summer gardens and sun-warmed stone, visions so vivid they feel like memories of another world entirely. But always, threading through these dreams, comes the whisper of wind and the crackle of fire, anchoring your unconscious mind to the reality of wool and fur and the patient battle against winter's siege. The fire has settled into its deepest rhythm now, burning steadily but lower, each flame carefully nursed by servants who understand that waste equals death when fuel must last until dawn. The glow that seeps through your curtained enclosure has dimmed to a steady orange pulse, barely enough to distinguish the weave of fabric from the darkness beyond. This is the dangerous hour when fires burn lowest and cold advances most boldly into defended spaces. You feel it as a subtle shift, a gradual cooling that seeps through even the most carefully constructed barriers. The thermal equilibrium you've worked hours to achieve begins its slow collapse as the chamber's stones assert their dominion over the fading fire's influence. Your body responds with increased vigilance, generating heat with the determination of survival, while the castle absorbs it with the patience of geological time. The wind outside finds new voices as the storm continues its patient assault on the fortress walls. Sometimes it moans through arrow slits like something in mourning. Sometimes it shrieks across battlements with the fury of the denied. But within your textile cave, these sounds become distant music. Winter's rage held at bay by layers of human ingenuity and animal sacrifice. The curtains around you sway slightly with each gust that penetrates the chamber, but they hold, maintaining the fragile boundary between your warmth and the hostile vastness beyond. Your heartbeat becomes the rhythm of endurance, each pulse pumping precious warmth through vessels that carry life to extremities already growing numb despite their woolen wrappings. The sound seems loud in the enclosed space, a steady drum that marks time in a world where clocks are luxuries and survival is measured in heartbeats preserved through the darkest hours. The moisture of your breath condenses on the inner surfaces of fabric, creating tiny droplets that catch what little firelight penetrates the weave. This is your atmosphere now, thick with the scent of survival, heavy with the weight of endurance rather than the lightness of comfort. Each breath adds to this ecosystem of persistence, your exhalations becoming part of the complex chemistry that sustains life within these textile walls. Somewhere beyond the curtains, a servant rises to tend the fire, their movements so practiced they require no conscious thought. The scrape of iron against stone, the whisper of fresh wood finding its place among glowing coals, the brief flare of renewed flame, these sounds punctuate the night like a slow heartbeat, marking time in a world where survival depends on the careful management of combustible resources. The first pale threads of dawn begin to seep through the shuttered windows, and with them comes the gradual retreat of winter's absolute dominion. You have survived the night, wrapped in layers of medieval ingenuity, warmed by fires tended through the darkness by vigilant servants. The stones that held cold so fiercely now prepare to accept the sun's first tentative gifts of warmth. Kings and queens, for all their crowns and kingdoms, face the same mortal struggle against winter that touches every human soul. Sleep well, knowing you've witnessed the true democracy of survival, where even royal blood must yield to the patient, relentless advance of cold through stone and time.